It's 21 to 10 here on 1233 ABC Newcastle. Gee, it's been a horrible week on our roads, hasn't it? It's just terrifying to think how quickly so many lives can change. Police Sergeant Jeffrey Richardson died on Saturday night after hitting a tree. A man sadly died in an accident between a car and a truck at Beresfield yesterday. And, of course, there was another fatality where a man died in a head-on collision with a truck at Williamtown. Now, while we don't know what caused all of those crashes as yet, the investigations continue into the causes of them. The Transport Workers Union says 3 recent fatal crashes involving trucks highlights the importance of the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, which was established in 2012, in a bid to reduce the pressure on truck drivers to meet deadlines. So how bad are the pressures on drivers? Well, Mick Forbes is the Newcastle Sub-Branch Secretary of the Transport Workers Union and joins me on the line now. Good morning, Mick.
Yeah, good morning, Paul.
Is this just drivers deflecting their responsibility on the roads?
Oh, look, I think it's much more than that. But first of all, I just want to say on behalf of the Transport Workers Union and the transport community, our hearts go out to those who have passed away in those accidents, yes. And obviously the people who survived those accidents as well. So our hearts and thoughts and prayers are with them. But as for the reasons behind those specific accidents, like you said earlier, we're not really we're not clear in the detail.
Yep.
But speaking generally, truck drivers are under an immense pressure to perform their duties on the road and meet deadlines, and we've got real concerns over where that's pressure coming from. In fact, we've had many years or many decades of experience in working that out, and quite frankly it comes from giant conglomerates such as Coles, who are putting a lot of economic pressure on drivers to perform their duties, and quite often when they're unable to meet these demands, they cut corners, and those cutting of corners often results in tragedies on our roads. So we're very concerned about it.
It's not just a problem for the trucking industry, of course, because you're dealing about the broader ramifications, of course, if the rest of the community is affected by the loss of life in cars, of course, as a result of some of these accidents. And indeed we've got, the economic hardship that flows as a consequence of that, while it may pale into insignificance in comparison to the personal struggles and losses. It's still a consideration. So as we discuss this issue, is it impractical to start looking at whether or not truck drivers should be refusing to work under these conditions, or is it just not possible to do that, Mick?
Look, and I think you've touched on some of the earlier comment there. This is the bread and butter of these people, paying the bills, paying the mortgage, getting the kids to school, putting food on the table, in short. So whilst there's quite often drivers are put under a lot of pressure to try and meet impossible deadlines, dangerously low rates of pay, another contributor, relieving economic pressure from their clients, which are by and large conglomerates. The drivers themselves have very little power to actually address any of the major concerns that contribute to them being under pressure in the first place. So at the end of the day, particularly when we're talking about owner drivers, they're basically small business people. Instead of putting money into a local shop, they put their life savings and huge loans into a truck, for example. If they don't get the work, or they're not meeting the deadlines, then they'll miss out on work. The truck will cost them money as to making them money, and sooner or later they lose their house, families fall apart. So there's massive pressure on drivers just to keep going under, quite often, the economic pressures that they've got no control over. So the knock-on effect of those low rates of pay and dangerous deadlines is that drivers are put under the pressure to cut corners. The types of corners they cut is such as maintenance services, they skip rest breaks, they speed. They don't want to do these things, but they're under pressure to meet the deadlines in order to survive. And the drivers themselves are held responsible and accountable for all those types of things, maintenance, etc., and having the proper rest breaks and travelling to save speeds. And they also need to be drug and alcohol free, and this is regulated by the RMS, and so it should be. But look, at the end of the day, the drivers have no economic power to set rates that allow them to achieve these safety objectives.
Mick, as you say, if one driver who's got their truck and their obligations to meet knocks back a job, there'll be a queue of a dozen behind him or her to take up that opportunity. So it does leave them in a vulnerable position. Are people recklessly making these decisions to take their super money and the payout from their safe job? You know, so many Australians operate under this illusion that working for yourself is going to be an easy road, and you know, you get all of this enormous freedom. And then all of a sudden you're there at 10 o'clock at night doing your accounts to try and get paid for what you've done. Are people recklessly going out and buying a truck and throwing themselves into the transport industry?
Look, that's probably not for me to answer. I mean, like any business, I guess there'd be people that may not have done their sums, but quite often what happens is people start off with a good contract, and the good contract might go for 3 or 4 years, perhaps. But obviously, if the truck payments go for 10 or 12 years and that work dries up, or they're put in a position where they have to take far less work or far less pay, and it's in a cutthroat situation, like you say, there'd be a queue of people behind them that are in a worse predicament that may well pick up that work. Then they feel the economic pressure to once again having to cut corners. So really, the responsibility to operate safely comes back to the people with the power, which are the large retailers. These large retailers are represented by organisations such as NatRoads, Australian Industry Group. These people have the power to influence safe rates through the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, but instead they use that power to talk down the importance of the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal and what it represents.
Mick, if we're going to blame the supermarkets, isn't the real villain here the consumer? I mean, we're putting pressure, we're buying and making our purchase decisions on the basis of price. Aren't we forcing the supermarkets to make these calls?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it that way. I mean, at the end of the day, if a carton of eggs went up 10 cents at Coles or some other, large retailer, we might have a whinge about it for the next door neighbour over the fence. At the end of the day, if you want to buy eggs, you pay the extra 10 cents. We're only talking about very small margins on, the globe. Don't forget, these are global companies. They turn over billions of dollars in profit every year. And my understanding is that the overall global transport cost is only around 2% of their profit. So it's actually quite small in comparison to the types of large money that they turn over and make in profit every year. So at the end of the day, if that flowed on to the consumer, I'm pretty sure people would accept paying a little bit more for a carton of eggs and a bottle of milk, for example, as to, that most people wouldn't have an understanding of how this flows on to the safety of our roads. I mean, when we're talking about 300 people a year in proximity, sometimes it's 330, sometimes it's 298. 300 people dying every year. It's not the ones that are injured, actual dying in truck-related crashes every year in Australia. With the transport needs predicted to double between now and 2030, that's a phenomenal amount of people actually dying on our roads, which could be greatly reduced, if not eliminated, if these large corporations would take more responsibility and actually support the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal as to, trying to get rid of it.
Okay. Thanks, Mick. Appreciate your insight.
Okay, thanks very much.
There's Mick Forbes, Newcastle Sub-Branch Secretary of the Transport Workers Union on 1233 ABC Newcastle.